Raider Zone Weekly with Steve Kandray, Vince Calautti, Billy Hassinger, and Jesse Meade.
This is Raider Zone Weekly. We thank you for joining us this week. It's myself, Billy Hassinger, and Vince Calautti, as we're going to be bringing you some news around the sporting world, and there's been a whole lot going on here in the last week that we have to get to, so no point in beating around the bush. Let's figure out what's going on. First, we're going to start off in the world of college basketball, and of course, it's the start of the season, the preseason, so we're going to see a lot of interesting exhibition games where the top teams in the nation routinely go out and slaughter their opponents. Of course, this last week, we saw Kentucky beating Morehouse 125-40, Kansas beating Fort Hays State 101-52, Ohio State beat Walsh 95-49. The question is, what is the point of these games? What purpose does it serve? And what do these teams, either teams, the lower division and or unranked, unwinning opponent, what do these teams get out of these games?
About the only thing I can think of that these teams actually gain from it is, like, for teams like Ohio State, Kentucky, and Kansas, they get those big giant leads, and then they're just able to put in these players that are freshmen, sophomores, who really probably aren't going to see the floor that much, if at all, during their season. So that's about the only thing I can think of, because you think about it, you put your players out there on floor against these teams like Ohio State playing Walsh. Yeah, it's a good experience for Walsh because you're going up against top-notch quality opponent in Ohio State. But if you're Ohio State, you look at it, if one of your star players gets hurt for the upcoming season, like if Buford were to go down, Kraft or someone like that, you're in trouble for the season, especially if it's a long, lingering injury that could take them out for about half the year.
Reasons 1, 2, and 3 for these smaller teams is definitely money. But since we can't talk about that, right. Reason number 4 is I would essentially equivalent this to a spring training for some of these guys. You don't have really in basketball. There's no any sort of preseason that you really think of when you think about it. You got your D League and NBA for college. This is essentially these guys. This is their warm up before their preseason tournaments.
I watched that Kentucky game. That was miserable. I mean, they were sticking in non-scholarship kids that are never going to see the court. They were draining 3-pointers against Morehouse. This game served no purpose. It was not even competitive for in any shape of the imagination. Was this game competitive? And actually, I just recalled just a couple years ago, Mount Union played. Who did they play? Akron. Yeah, I believe it was Akron they played near. Obviously, it was at Akron, but it wasn't a competitive game. But again, it makes you wonder, what benefit did Akron get out of playing a Division III basketball team? I guess, again, like Vince mentioned, it's all about the money. You get money for the school that gets pounded. At least they get paid for their efforts to be beat down pretty heavily. And
you also look at it, it's a good experience for the team that does get beat down, because it's almost kind of demoralizing to get beat that bad. But you go into a game, if you can keep it somewhat competitive and stuff. We've seen Division II schools in recent memory, like Grand Valley State being Michigan State, and some other teams like that really staying competitive. If you're able to play well like that against a D1 school like that, Ashland's another one that in the last few years has played Ohio State and really been close with them. If they're able to do that, it's a good moral victory for them, because then they can take that into the season and say, we can play with anyone that in the country. So it's like, if we can play with the D1 school, why can't we play with D2 and D3 schools?
I'm sorry, but losing 125-40 is not going to have any sort of moral victory whatsoever in these types of games.
I didn't say that was going to be a moral victory.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm saying if you keep it close with the
it's a cool story, I guess. Even then, I was on the court against Kentucky and lost by 90.
Even saying that, though, I don't see as much of a moral victory, as long as more along the lines of we're just going to be warming stuff up.
Vince and I know what's up.
Yeah. Right there.
Always. Love it. As always, though, money is the driving factor in these kinds of things. And, of course, Morehouse was handsomely compensated, I'm sure, for their willingness to let their players get completely slaughtered by Kentucky.
You got to wonder if they put the money on their bed so they could sleep in it to suffice their wounds after that game.
That might help. I mean, that would make me feel better about an injury. Yeah. Let's move on, though. Patriots released Albert Haynesworth after acquiring him in an offseason trade. So here's the question. Could not even Bill Belichick reform Albert Haynesworth?
No. I mean, it goes to show. He's played a number of games this year. He's only got like 3 tackles this season, and I think it was kind of foolish for the Patriots to go out and trade for him, especially with the contract he had. The 7-year, $100 million contract that Snyder signed into in Washington, and he just got picked up by the Bucs this week to replace Joe McCoy, who's down for the season. So you think about it, he's just one of those guys. He's one of those head cases that not even Bill Belichick could get brought back down to earth. And, he's still having his problems with Ocho Cinco. He's really not putting up the numbers that he was expected to put up coming into the system with Walker as a slot guy, Hernandez and Gronkowski as the tight ends, and then him just being out there on the field.
Isn't it amazing that this happened right after he got a 7-year, $100 million contract? There it is again. You get paid. Who cares? You don't have to be good. You got paid. He's guaranteed. Exactly. That's guaranteed money in the NFL.
It was like 40-some or 50-some $million guaranteed money. Yeah. So, I mean, all he cares about is he got that nice fat paycheck, and he can go out and buy like 4 Ferraris and be happy for the rest of his life.
Yeah. The other half of this is that the Patriots' defense is really, really terrible. Like, extremely terrible.
Historically terrible.
Yeah. And they're bad. So part of that is like Belichick hasn't been able to figure out his defense at all this year. But that being said, Haynesworth is awful. He's one of those guys that you can equivalent this to those NBA players who have one great season. They get paid a buttload of money, and then they sit there and they get injured, or they sit on the bench and contribute maybe 5 points a game. You know how bad it is when the reputation Albert Haynesworth has is so bad that when Billy came into my room the other night when I was doing some homework, looked over at the television and goes, "Wait, they signed him? Why did they sign him?"
Right?
I go, Gerald McCoy got hurt. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's right. Still a stupid decision," and just walked right back out.
It's like you're getting one of those guys. He's just there to take up space. He's not going to do anything for you.
Exactly. He's there to collect a paycheck now on a week-to-week basis.
And it's just pretty much it's pretty awful. I think again, both sides. The defense is bad, but really this is just. He's just lazy, essentially, is what it comes down to.
It says a lot, though, if not even Bill Belichick and the Patriots could reform him, because this is what they do. They pick up guys that no one else wants, and they say, you're going to play for us, but you're going to play by our rules. And obviously, Albert Haynesworth was not fulfilling his end of the bargain, so they cut him. And this is a team that is not afraid to do this. Even though it may seem like a waste, the Patriots are geniuses at picking up draft picks and drafting and getting guys that'll fit into their system. And they can afford to burn one, basically, essentially, with Albert Haynesworth.
He didn't even get a season. Usually you get a season within the Patriots system. That didn't even happen.
Well, I can't argue with the decision, really.
No.
When you think about everything that the Patriots do, he's definitely not a Patriot.
5 Undivided.
And I say that as a person that kind of vaguely hates the Patriots. 5 Undivided. This is the subject, of course, that we all knew we have to talk about, and it is one that is still pretty... it's developing, and it's still pretty ginger to discuss. Of course, Joe Paterno was fired late last night, along with the university president. Penn State is moving forward with their game against Nebraska this weekend. A lot of stuff going on here. Of course, the discussion now is why Coach McCreary is still on the sidelines for Penn State, although now there are rumors swirling around that he will not be coaching this Saturday and that his firing may also be imminent.
I've gone on record as saying on this show a few different times that Paterno would be fired by Penn State or something. Never thought it would be like this. As a man who, with his great experiment, trying to uphold moral values inside a system, he had done extremely well for as long as he was there, to not have one blemish on his record. Now this is just, it's a tragedy. And you got to look at it this way, though. It's terrible what happened. And the fact of the matter is he was the leader at the time. That's why he got the axe. Him and the president both got the axe because they were the leaders. They failed to respond adequately. The AD was ended up resigning. He's probably going to be tried and purging. Will probably go to jail because of it. Sandusky will more than likely be found guilty. I am surprised that the assistant coach is still there, but like you said, he's probably going to be gone. And how about the new coach coming in? He's coming under a media firestorm worse than what happened earlier in the summer with Ohio State. This is
not even close
10 times worse. This and a great season goes down the drain because of it.
Here's the thing. I have multiple times this week, and Billy has seen a couple of them. I have completely ranted and said anyone that has had any thought of something is owed to these football players to let Joe Paterno finish, or something is owed to the university for Joe Paterno's 60+ years of being by all metrics a exemplary human being. That something should be owed to him, let him finish the season. That's not what this is about. This isn't about football anymore. This isn't about Penn State anymore. This is about some children who were horrifically violated in a way that many people can't even understand. And unfortunately for Joe Paterno, he made a decision that at the time he believed was the right decision. I'm sure we'll learn more about that decision as we move forward. And though it was legally the correct decision, it is not the morally correct decision. And because of that, there was just way too much pressure. It would have been unacceptable, I believe, for anyone around the nation to have Joe Paterno remain on the sidelines, to remain coaching for this team, given everything that has happened.
It is, and it's just real unfortunate that he had to go out that way. He's done such a great job with the program. He's been the head coach for 40-plus years. He's been on the staff as a coach, as an assistant coach, for another 15 or so years. He's been there for over 60 years, and it's very rare to say that any coach anywhere has been coaching for as long as Joe Pa has, let alone to be at one school for that long. Bobby Bowden's the other one who's even somewhat close to that in Division I football. Of course, down here in D3, we got Calautti up at St. John's, but, just you look at the legacy of Joe Paterno, you see all the great things that he did, numerous championships, so many times he got to the big bowl games, and then, of course, back when I believe we were sophomores in high school, it was the showdown between Joe Pa and Bobby Bowden in the Orange Bowl with Penn State and Florida State, and then one thing that he's going to be remembered for forever is going to be this scandal and everything that happened. Like you said, Jesse, it's just so unfortunate at what happened to the kids or the victims here.
So many red flags along the way, and that's the thing too that really made the fact that why Paterno had to be fired, why McCreary should be fired. He should have been fired the same day as Paterno. Yeah. There were so many red flags. Obviously, Sandusky was a great friend of Paterno's. He was the heir apparent at one point at Penn State, and so him and Paterno they obviously had a very close relationship. At one point, Penn State had to tell Sandusky he was not allowed to bring kids to Penn State. That's a red flag.
1998, he was not allowed to shower with them.
And honestly, there was not one thing that administratively went on that campus that Joe Paterno did not know about. Joe Paterno was the head man on campus, not the president, Joe Paterno. So he would have known at some point, at what point do you have a sit-down conversation and ask what's going on? At what point is your decision to let you know the way the power structure is, as we should finish here, but to let you know what the power structure is, the person that saw these acts and reported to Joe Paterno, that tells you something about Penn State, that his first instinct was not to call the police, it was to tell Joe Paterno, who then waited for a day before he told anyone. Just a very bizarre situation. And we'll watch it play out, but it's not going to be pretty at this point. It can only get worse from here. Moving on to the NBA, lockout still continues. We, of course, expected on Wednesday that there was going to be a deadline where the players would have to accept a deal offered by David Stern or they would drop the deal. Of course, David Stern then said that they were going to keep the deal going. They're going to freeze frame it and let the two sides keep negotiating as long as they kept negotiating in good faith. But here's the question. How much longer do you expect these two sides to negotiate in good faith?
I don't think it's going to be much longer. The owners want so much, the players want so much. At one point, these guys, we've said it all along, these guys, both sides just need to quit being a bunch of babies and get back to playing ball because, they're all going to miss out on the money when the season comes to an end. And then also, they're really hurting their fan base right now because the fans want to see basketball. Everyone in Cleveland, I'm pretty sure, wants to see the Heat come to town for the first time this year so they can boo LeBron again and be all over him. And that game would most likely be a sellout. And the fans, when this comes back, with all these games being missed already, here being in November, the games are canceled up probably after Thanksgiving, I think. It's just going to be, the fans are just going to be real irritated, and no one's going to be wanting to go to these basketball games.
Isn't that just the Cavs' luck? You get two first-round picks and there's no season?
Well, think about this, too. You look, I just recently found this out and read this. The NBA has now dropped from 3rd to 4th in attendance. The MLS has passed them. I'm a big soccer fan. The MLS has passed them in attendance. People are arguing the stadium's bigger and stuff. It doesn't matter. When a sport that was not invented in your own country passes a sport invented in your own country, that gives us like a problem. That I'm really it's gotten to the point right now where I'm pretty sure the entire season is going to be canceled. Stern is going to get his way. It's not going to matter.
You know what a lot of the problems in the NBA is, and this is the thing that no one is actually going to address in any collective bargaining. The NBA is too big. There are too many teams that don't matter, that are small market teams that are never going to do anything. The NBA should probably contract, but I can't think of any league in recent history that has actually contracted in size. But when you got all these teams that are never ever going to be good in the NBA, there's no point. The biggest example that comes to mind, of course, is the Milwaukee Bucks. Other teams though that have historically just never been good ever. To me, it's a bizarre situation. We've talked about it so many times, the NBA contract disputes. But at this point, I think if it wasn't obvious before, we're not going to have an NBA season.
No. If they even get 40 games in this year, it will be a very big surprise.
Hey, let's move on to something that's not depressing. And this is not depressing as much as it is just an interesting story. Mike Leach is making it known via the national press that he wants the Ole Miss job. Houston Nutt fired recently, but here's the question: if you're Mississippi, do you really want to bring in a guy that's going to run basically the same system that Houston Nutt did and didn't succeed at all in the SEC?
Well, you have to look at Mike Leach. The reason why he's successful is because it's essentially his system. I know Houston Nutt's older and runs it, but I think Leach's system is a little more effective to go around. However, that being said, he will not get the job. He still has that huge stain on him for what happened at Texas Tech. People are staying away from him because of that incident. There's a lot of people that he tried to apply for another job a few years back, and people were writing letters to not let him in. So he's going to have a long way to go with that. You got Donald Trump, though, that's on his side. Donald Trump is a big fan of his, and I don't know if that
helps. Because if we needed anyone's opinion for this,
I don't know if that helps or hurts him. And there was an actual letter on ESPN where Trump wrote to the person and said, I warned you once that you didn't hire him, and look what happened. Now you're on the search again. You should hire him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I don't think he'll get it regardless, just because of what's happened at Texas Tech.
If he would happen to get the job, I don't see him succeeding at Mississippi State just because you look at his system worked so well at Texas Tech. But we talked about it before, look at the defenses that the Big 12 has. Not to say that they're not horrible, but they're not the grade A type caliber that you see in the SEC week in, week out. You got those great defensive players at each school. Right. You know, we talked about it before. Nebraska, the recent memory, put out Ndamukong Suh. Oklahoma put out Gerald McCoy. Last year, Texas A&M put out Von Miller. But you'd see it as just one player that really takes over a defense in the Big 12. Compared to the SEC, where you got playmakers all the way around. LSU this year has two cornerbacks that are top 10 talent in this next year's draft, in Claiborne and Matthew. So it's just like the offense worked against defenses that aren't that good, but in the SEC, I don't think it would be that successful.
The thing that stands out to me about this job, too, is that he would have a substantially smaller player pool, I think, to recruit from, and at least initially, than he did in Texas. You know, you could still bring in some great quarterbacks to play for you in Texas. That may not be the case in Mississippi. You know, he may have some name value, maybe just because of the way the system was, but that's a hard sell to say come to Mississippi and don't go to don't go to Florida, don't go to Louisiana, don't go to Georgia to play football. Come play with us here in Mississippi.
Yeah, in Mississippi, if you think about it, it's right in the middle of smack dab in the middle of the southern area. There's not much ground to move anywhere. You're near Alabama, which has two teams that have recently won national championships. So it's going to be much harder in the recruitment area for him to get anything done.
Tough sell. Mike Leach, I'm sure, I really believe he'll get a job at some point, but I don't know if it'll be as high profile as a SEC type job. Let's move on to our cheers of the week. Finally, something that's kind of happy. Virginia is the only one game out of the ACC Coastal Conference lead, Coastal Division lead. They do control their own destiny, which is interesting to think about. They have games against Duke, Florida State, and Virginia Tech. Duke obviously is winnable. However, those last two, Florida State and Virginia Tech, that could pose some problems here for Virginia. Do the Cavaliers have a shot here?
They do have a shot, and just for the fact that Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, the two teams that are in front of them, they are playing right now. And if Virginia Tech wins that game, Georgia Tech would have two conference losses. And then you go to the other side. If Virginia does win out, beats Virginia Tech, they would only have, I believe, one conference loss or two conference losses on the season. They would be in a three-way tie with Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, and they own the tiebreaker because they beat Georgia Tech. Yep. So they would own the tiebreaker. So it is very possible that we could see Virginia in the ACC title game come the end of the season.
That's just a bizarre statement.
Isn't it?
Virginia.
It's the ACC, man. Why not?
I mean, Virginia Tech last year lost their first two games, went on to win the ACC. So you got to look at this. But I think that's awesome. That this is a team, historically, they're not the best. And coming through might be a magical season for them. I like it. I hope that they grab that destiny and go at it. And maybe it's their year. You never know.
Here's the thing. ACC is the automatic bid. I mean, think about that. They would have to win the conference title, which is that's a steep hill to climb. But I can't even imagine a scenario where we're seeing Virginia in a BCS bowl would be quite a bizarre result. as the ACC plays in the Orange Bowl, correct?
I believe, yeah, they play in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, they play in the Orange Bowl. So really, that's actually if it's seeded the way it normally is. If there's not an at-large put in there, but that's a winnable game as well. I mean, the Orange Bowl against the Big East. That's not.
That'll be an interesting one.
Well, the way that they had the bowl set up is the Big East pretty much goes to whichever kind of bowl game,
whichever one's the weakest,
whichever they decide to put them in. As last year, Virginia Tech went on to play Stanford in the Orange Bowl, and they just got pretty much stumped. But and you talk about Virginia being historically bad in recent memory. They had good players too.
Great players.
They had DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
Doesn't make any sense.
Brandon Albert and Eugene Monroe as 3 offensive linemen, all drafted in the first round. They had Chris Long, the son of Howie Long, who is now beginning to tear it up in St. Louis at defensive end. Brandon Flowers is a talented quarterback who fell to the second round, and the Chiefs picked him up. They've had good players, but they just haven't been able to put it all together, and now they're finally putting it together.
Yeah, it's just one of those things like where you're really surprised that the players that come out, like Syracuse. Think of Syracuse. The amount of people that have come out of Syracuse that are professional.
Yeah.
Jim Brown being the biggest example of that. Donovan McNabb. These are just teams that are.
Well, sometimes they just produce players. Virginia has produced players, not necessarily a lot of titles, but hey. This is a story that I'm rooting for because, again, I have no vested interest in the ACC's outcome, so this would just be awesome to watch play out. Jeers of the week, and this one is it really got me when I saw the score pop up on a little ticker. My eyes almost popped out of my head. The Dolphins get their first win of the year, and it's against a Kansas City team that had just beaten the Chargers in overtime. People suddenly were on the Chiefs bandwagon. This team's going to win the AFC West. They lose 31-3 to the Dolphins.
You really got to wonder if that winning streak they had when he started growing the beard was really just. I felt that was just like that high, and you had a feeling that bubble was just going to pop. Never expected against the Dolphins, but you got to give credit to the Dolphins here. They've been fighting hard in their last games. It's not like they've gotten blown out by players. They've lost close games. They've lost games by a lot in certain points, but other times they've only lost by a few. So you got to look at it that way. But yeah, Kansas City I think they got that first win. They started believing in themselves, and momentum can only carry you so far. At some point, you have to rely on your talent. You have to rely on your skill to play. And the Chiefs, I think, are regrading back to what they were in the first week there. They kind of came down a little bit. Maybe they can grab that a little bit and go on, but I don't see them winning the West.
The talent's still there. You got to give it. But the thing is, it just goes to show how much the Chiefs are missing Jamal Charles. He was a huge part of that offense, and then him going down in the beginning of the year with that torn ACL, that really hurt the offense. Jonathan Baldwin is starting to play like the first-round pick that they made him worthy of, and I think that they just overlooked this game. They came off the win against the Chargers. They were probably looking ahead to next week, and they thought the Dolphins, they're winless. This will be an easy game for us. No, they just overlooked it, and then they were unable to get back into the game. The Dolphins just played a great game on Sunday.
To me, the more I look at it, the more it becomes at least apparent to me that Matt Castle's not the guy that they thought they were going to get. He every now and then he does put up a good game, and not to say that he isn't talented, but I just don't think he's the consistent great quarterback that they thought that they were going to get from New England. And when you lose a running back as good as Charles, and your offense suddenly has to rely on a guy like Castle, that's, I think, a little bit too much pressure for him to bear throughout an entire season.
Yeah, and you've got, it doesn't help that when your other two running backs, Thomas Jones is just old. He was really good at one point.
He's still in the league.
Yeah, exactly. You're sitting there wondering, wait, when is this guy going to retire? And you got to look. If he had been 2 or 3 years ago, losing Jamal Charles wouldn't have been nearly as bad because Thomas was one of those guys. He was really underrated. He could carry a team pretty well and play really well. And then but he's older. You got another guy. I don't remember his name.
McCluster's an interesting player.
McCluster's hit and miss.
He's an interesting guy. Yeah. He's almost like a Reggie Bush type character.
He is. That's what he is. He came from Ole Miss, and he's one of those guys that if you hand it off in the backfield, he has the ability to spring it for a long run.
And every team should have one player like that.
The only problem is, though, he doesn't have the strength, and he has to get to the outside. And in the NFL, with the hash marks being so much closer than they are in college ball, there's not as much space on the outside.
Right, and again, McCluster's an interesting person because, like you said, some weeks he's great, some weeks he's not. But much like the Dolphins have found out once they lost their running backs, is that Reggie Bush is good, and yeah, he had one great game, but he's just those types of backs they can't be an every down back in the NFL. 5 undivided, and here's where I say it so begins. Charles Woodson wants to talk about going 19-0. Says that the Packers should not shy away from talking about going 19-0, and that they should be very confident that they can do so. Can the Packers do it?
There's two schools of thought with this. There's the one school of thought which is kind of like with the pitchers pitching the perfect game. Everyone talks in hushed tones around. No one goes near him. He sits in solitude in the corner and thinks. You don't want to disrupt his rhythm. Then there's the other group that says you got to talk. You got to loosen up. You got to face it head on and go. And obviously Woodson's in that group, and I think that's what they need to do right now. They have to legitimately start saying, okay, we're 8-0. We need to go and we need to play this, and we need to see, because questions are going to start bounding. You can't keep shying away because the pressure will slowly build up on you, particularly in a football-related world. They're going to start talking, comparing them to New England. When they went 19-1, they're going to start bringing that stuff up. And this is coming from a veteran. This is not coming from a young guy. If a veteran is coming out and saying these things, this is when the veterans get the young guys together and go, this is how you deal with it. I think it's a good play, but at the same time, don't get too far ahead. Try to take things one game at a time and try and keep it at that level.
This is all well and good, but none of this matters because my Vikings are going to completely stomp them this week. And Christian Ponder's going to throw about 5 touchdowns and 400 yards. So this isn't really a main point.
What about it? No, we need Peterson to score 6 touchdowns here.
No. Well, yeah. I guess I do have Peterson, but still,
I have Peterson.
Christian Ponder. I'm telling you, next Joe Montana. Keep an eye on.
Hey, I've been saying that Ponder was one of the most NFL-rated quarterbacks coming in this year's draft, but I don't think that they should necessarily be talking about it just because you look back to that 2007 season when the Patriots were on that run. Everyone was talking about it, and then you go undefeated during the regular season. That's great and all. You go through your 2 playoff games. That's great. Then you get that letdown in the Super Bowl. It is so much easier.
What a beautiful letdown it was.
It was. It was. I will agree with you there, but it's. You almost don't. You want to go undefeated throughout the entire season, but it's almost so much better to get 1 or 2 losses during the season because then all that pressure's off. You're not worried about it. You're not playing uptight. You're not forcing the issue because you're not trying to pursue anything except for that Super Bowl title. And if the Packers lose 1 or 2 games this year, I think that they could possibly go all the way and win it because they have all their guys back that were on IR last year. They had 15 guys on IR, and you got to remember some of the teams in the last 15, 20 years. Your Vikings back in '98, they went 15-1 during the season, lost in the NFC title game to the Falcons. The Steelers went 15-1.
Thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome. The Steelers went 15-1 during the regular season. Roethlisberger's rookie year, they get thumped in the AFC title game by the Patriots. So success during the regular season doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make it to the Super Bowl.
That's something we should talk about, though. There are a lot of eerie similarities here between this Packers team and that Patriots team. The offenses, obviously the Packers offense is geared more to go downfield than the Patriots was, but still, some of these scores that the Packers are putting up, these are like college football scores, blowouts on a week-to-week basis that you hardly see in the NFL.
The other thing you have to look at with that is that their defense is giving up is the 4th lowest defense in the game, and that's really sad to see from a Mount Union alum. But you gotta look at this. It's that they have to win these shootouts, and Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, which we've seen the last few years. I don't think he's gone a full season yet without having to get knocked out at some point due to concussion syndromes. If he gets out, they got Matt Flynn as their backup. Sorry, that's not going to cut it. You're not going to go undefeated in that type of matchup, particularly with a defense that's giving up as many points as it is.
Matt Flynn, I think, is actually a pretty decent quarterback. Not that I believe they could go undefeated with Matt Flynn.
Yeah.
But, this is a Packers team that's loaded with talent. The defense, again, is what you have to go after. But the problem is, I can't think of any teams in the NFL that could win a shootout with the Packers. Maybe the Patriots, because, God knows the Patriots defense wouldn't stop the Packers.
Yeah.
We would see, if that was the Super Bowl, we'd see like a 67-70, victory for one team. But I just right now they definitely look unbeatable, but the thing is, it doesn't matter if you look unbeatable because any team is beatable on any week in the NFL. We've seen tons of terrible teams beat tons of great teams in the NFL. That's the great thing about the league that makes it so great that any team can win.
Yeah, we saw that last year. The Browns had 2 victories last year that no one was expecting. They beat the Saints, and then they go in and hand the Patriots their second loss of the season. That was great for Browns fans everywhere.
The Seahawks in the playoffs.
Yeah.
How great was that?
That was awesome.
The team that should not have been in the playoffs by any stretch of the means were able to defeat one of the most powerful, respected teams in the NFL.
And it's all thanks to Marshawn Lynch.
Marshawn Lynch. Amazing.
On a flip note, how crazy is it that the Saints are now a respected team in the NFL?
Yeah,
let's think about that.
That's also something that's great about the NFL. The Cardinals were in probably the greatest Super Bowl ever played.
Yeah,
that's something to think about.
Yeah, it was. It was one of the great ones.
NFLPA wants to hold a bowl game for all draft eligible players, and you see this headline, you think, oh, okay, another Senior Bowl type game. That's pretty cool. But since this is being run by the NFLPA, here's the question: how do they choose what players from that pool to allow into this game? And the other question is, if whatever system that the NFLPA uses to choose these players, would that show preferential treatment of who the NFLPA wants the NFL to see and draft?
It would definitely show who the NFLPA wants to see, the players that they want to see spotlighted. And it could be beneficial to the players, but, it's just like one of those bowl games. It could also hurt them, because if they go out there, like, for instance, if you're Tyrann Mathieu, he comes out this year, he goes out and he plays, and he has a horrible game. They're going to say that he had a horrible game against top-notch talent in this bowl game against everyone else in the draft, and that could very well hurt his draft stock. So it's one of those things. It could help them, but it can also hurt them at the same time. It's just one of those things that the NFLPA wants to have a bowl game, because you see the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine game, you see all these games, and they feel that everyone should have a chance to be in display on an All-Star game.
I'm in full agreement with you. I think this is bad. This is just bad for the NFLPA. They need to stay away from this overall. Let others, scouts and those guys do it. But if you're going to do it, here's what you need to do. You need to do NHL-style All-Star game. You get the president of the Players Association. You get another person who's higher up there or something. You set them aside, and they pick people back and forth, and do like a draft. Do it like that.
I still say that was the greatest. Awesome. That was the greatest stroke of genius for an All-Star game.
That
ever.
was so.
And it would be
awesome.
perfect with the NBA if the NBA existed right now. But
that would require David Stern to have an idea. But I digress.
But honestly, the NFLPA just needs to stay away from this. Let the scouts and those guys handle it, and do it that way. Do not get involved. This is just going to be messy and bad for you.
I mean, realistically, for the NFL draft, there are a lot of guys who, the difference between being a draft pick and undrafted free agent, that's a pretty big discrepancy in the amount of money that you can draw as a player. And to not get in this game and be able to showcase your talents, or have someone at the same position who's in this game able to showcase their talents and get elevated up over you, that could be serious money lost, because of the organization that you have to be a member of chose that person to play ahead of you.
Do you honestly expect the NFLPA to go down into like Division III or those types of places? I don't see them doing that.
Well, no, the NFLPA will draw whoever will bring in the most ratings for their bowl game.
Exactly, and that's going to be all the D1 players.
Moving on, Eli Manning leading the Giants with a victory over the Patriots. Again, it was an impressive comeback victory for Eli against the defense that's not so impressive. But here's the thing. Did Eli silence any critics on Sunday? And here's the other question. Was that more of a question of Manning being the great quarterback that he says he is, or the Patriots defense being bad?
I really think it's the Patriots being bad. As much as Eli Manning this year, he calls himself an elite quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. He did win a Super Bowl on a crazy play where he dodged how many different people plus the practice squad of the Patriots to go around and throw that ball.
Right.
And get the game-winning touchdown was passed to number 85 again for them this past Sunday. Kind of a little stab in the heart for every Patriots fan, but I don't see it as him silencing any critics. He's always going to have those critics, but for the amount of interceptions, befuddled faces he gives after passes, plays where you just look at it and go, what are you doing? I just don't see how this really silenced any critics. It had it been against a Green Bay, defeating them, had it been against Detroit, who's got a great defense, one of those guys, against Pittsburgh or something like that, I would have been a little more with that. But the other factor you got to look in this critics is his comparison to his brother. He's always going to be in his brother's shadow no matter what. And even if Peyton been good or bad, that's what he still would have been in his shadow.
And that's the thing right there. You look at it, Eli's trying to live up to the hype, to the name of Manning, and he's trying to live up to the hype that Peyton has drawn throughout his entire career. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. You look at the way he dissects plays. Would come up to the line so many times. He'd have three plays: a run to the left, a run to the right, and a pass play. And then when he would look at the defense, that's when he would call the play. He wouldn't call it back in the huddle. He would call three different plays, and then he'd call when he got to the line. That is what Peyton Manning does, and that's what Eli is trying to do. He's trying to be too much like Peyton instead of being Eli out there on the field. He tries to imitate Peyton so much that he forces himself into these mistakes. He tries to make passes that he can't make, and just things like that. And it just really hurts Eli a lot more than it helps him.
He's a great quarterback. He really is. He's never going to put up these mind-numbing stats, but he's a great quarterback. He has led a ton of comebacks as in his time as a Giants quarterback, and he has a Super Bowl ring. I don't think he's ever going to be a single-handed reason why the Giants win games, But when you look at it, the Giants have really had an ever-evolving rotation of wide receivers. Their running back situation always seems like it's a different person every year. Of course, it's kind of settled a little bit with Bradshaw now and Jacobs. But the one constant has been Eli Manning, and the Giants have consistently been pretty good with him at quarterback. Yeah. Again, I don't think he's ever going to be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning level quarterback, but still a great quarterback who has a serious chance of winning another Super Bowl in New York. Moving on to boxing, I know Billy's excited to talk about it because Pacquiao and Marquez is this weekend, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Pacquiao Mayweather because that's the thing that everyone cares about. Because you can dissect this as you're the more involved boxing fan here, but does Marquez have any shot?
No, not really.
Okay, so Pacquiao Mayweather. Yeah. What's the odds of this happening now that we've established that?
The odds of Pacquiao Mayweather actually happening is supposedly a lot better than it was before because Mayweather has said that he's planning on his next fight being in May, I believe, and I believe it's May 5th is the date that he's got set for it, and he wants the best fight possible, which would be Manny Pacquiao. But, something's going to happen. It's going to come down to a drug test again, and which Pacquiao is going to be okay with, but then Mayweather's going to find some reason to back out of the fight because he doesn't want his pretty face smashed in by Pacquiao, who's got a monstrous right hook, and he doesn't want to see his perfect record in his career go down the toilet. And the only reason I'm not going to be watching Pacquiao Marquez Saturday night is the fact that it's Junior Dos Santos and Cain Velasquez for the UFC.
All right. Here's the thing: if this Pacquiao Mayweather thing, and Mayweather knows what he's doing. If this is going to happen, it's going to happen on his terms. But here's the thing: it's been built up for so long, you got to be careful because it can either result in if you don't wait too much longer, the biggest boxing pie rate in years. For quite some time, maybe this decade, or you could wait too long, you blow your chance, no one cares anymore. Yeah. Manny Pacquiao is just like, I don't care, I'm just gonna keep my titles, and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. The biggest issue here, like you said, Marquez, this is the third bout between them, so real quick, that should be that indicates that the fights have been pretty good the last two times. Pacquiao has won them. I would say Marquez maybe have a slight shot, but I highly, highly doubt it because Pacquiao is so good. Back to Pacquiao Mayweather. Because both boxers are very good. Very smart, tactical boxers, particularly Mayweather. He is not a power puncher anymore. He's a very tactical boxer, very good at finding his spots and making sure they count. So it would be a great matchup between them, and everybody's waiting for this fight. This is one of those century fights that saves boxing, brings it back up again. You've had Ali Frazier. You've got Foreman Frazier, Foreman Ali, those guys. Tyson versus the Buster Douglas Tyson fight. That was a earth shaker. Yeah. Those types of boxing matches. This is what's going to happen with this Pacquiao. No matter what, it's going to build up either way, and it may be terrible in the end because Pacquiao may thrash him or vice versa. The reason
this has to happen is not because it would be necessarily a great boxing match. This has to happen because this is the type of boxing match, and maybe the only one currently that will get people who are not interested in boxing watching. As I can tell you, there will be a ton of interest for this fight, even from people who don't watch boxing or care about boxing or know anything about boxing, and that's a lot of scratch that they're going to be missing out on if they don't pull this off.
It's hockey time.
It is hockey time, and interesting move this last week. Of course, the Blue Jackets floundering, being the worst team in the NHL. It's actually a new thing for me. I've never experienced being a fan of the worst team in the NHL. That's new. But we're not talking about the Blue Jackets. The Penguins made a trade, sending Mark Letizia, the center to the Blue Jackets for a fourth rounder. Opens up a spot for a center. Crosby keeps denying that his timetable for return is undetermined, but could this be the opening for Sidney Crosby's return?
I think so. This is something, again, they really want to be careful with him. They don't want him to go back too early and take one hit, be on the ice, and be done for the rest of his career. That their future and hopes are riding on him being okay. So while I still think there is no necessary timetable, there is a roundabout timetable where they're saying you should be okay by him. He was already getting jostled around in practice already this past week. They were just talking about this on PTI and Around the Horn. So I think this is something. It's a move stating somewhere in the future, this is the roundabout time we expect Crosby to return. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen because we want to make sure he is absolutely 112% absolutely healthy, ready to go.
I think that could happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks. There's talk about him possibly returning this weekend, But I think the coaching staff is going to be a little bit more cautious than that. Let him continue practicing, get jostling around there, and then see how he reacts to it this weekend. But there's what they're talking about him possibly coming back this weekend, and now it's kind of being shuttered off a little bit. I think that in the next 2-3 weeks, at the very most the next month, we could see him back out there on the ice, and that would just be a huge lift for Penguins fans everywhere.
And the thing, too, is for his return, you don't want to have two things. You don't want to have his return on the road, and you don't want to have his return against a good team or a team that has a tough defense. So you want to find a home game against a soft defensive team. I'm not quite sure when the Blue Jackets come to town.
That's what I was thinking, too. It's like, when are they playing the Jackets?
Take on the worst defense in the NHL. Why not? But that's the thing. You don't want to stick them out there in a game that is not under as much control as the Penguins can have.
It's the Strasburg model. Bring on the guy with the worst team so he can look super great,
Toss him out there, gets the
throw him out there. 11 strikeouts. Let's go 3 goals against the softest defense in the league where you won't get hit very much, and then we'll pull you out halfway through to make sure you're okay.
Right, and it's a smart move. Again, we can't know any concrete details about his return, but it is looking like it will be soon for Sidney Crosby, which is a good thing for the NHL. We got one last 5 Undivided for the evening, so I should get the soundbite going.
5 Undivided.
Of course, this is another one that's a little bit somber. Smoking Joe Frazier, we mentioned him earlier in the show, dies this week after his bout with cancer. Unfortunately, his story overshadowed by other stories that we will not bring up again. But for Joe Frazier, huge legacy left behind in boxing, the first man to defeat, the greatest boxer ever. Joe Frazier accomplished quite a bit in his career, and it's a sad way to see his life come to an end.
It is. He fought Muhammad Ali 3 times. Like you said, Jesse, he gave him Ali's first loss of his career, fought Ali in the Thrill at Manila, and that fight, along with another fight between Frazier and Ali, were named the fights of the year in those prospective years. And you just look at the things that Frazier did. He's one of those guys that really helped set the table for boxing as to what it is today. Him and Ali, those thrilling fights that they had back then. And boxing lost a legend here this past week. And as Joe Frazier, he's going to be one of those guys that, even if you're not a boxing fan, like we talked about a little bit ago, you're going to know the name Joe Frazier for the fact that he fought Ali at the Thrill in Manila.
There were that's what talked about, the Thrill in Manila. That is the fight of the century of all time. 14 rounds, called only because Frazier's trainer wouldn't let him go out because he couldn't see.
Right.
And these literally people, the
Pretty
writers,
good reason not to box.
Writers were describing it as both men were trying to kill each other. This was not a boxing match. This was a war, and they were aiming to kill each other. All the antagonizing that Ali did to Frazier, all the stuff that he did to basically turn everybody against Frazier at certain points, made him bitter, and that's where that animosity came between the two as they fought, because Ali needed Frazier to be good. There's no Ali without Frazier defeating him to push him with any of those battles. And you got to look at, those are the things you're going to remember him for. Thrill in Manila, fighting Ali, defeating Ali, and you're going to remember him for being a champion and for the always a connection between those two. And it's sad to see him go.
The other thing, too, is that is unfortunate for his career is that perhaps the most famous moment of his career is down goes Frazier. But still, that's the fact that this man will forever live on in boxing. Lore. This is a guy who should never, be forgotten for his accomplishments in the sport and for everything that he did. He's kind of what his legacy, I guess, is one of those legacies where he was never. I guess he would never have it be considered, the greatest of all time, but that does not diminish his accomplishments at all, because he is one of the greats, and he beat a lot of the boxers who are in the running for the greatest of all time, and a lot of boxers owe Joe Frazier for making their career. Like you just mentioned, there is no Muhammad Ali as we know him today without Joe Frazier.
Yeah, then like Vince said, they were trying to kill each other in that fight. If they would have been able just to go until one of them dropped dead, they would have, and for all we know, they probably would have both landed a right hook and just kill each other right there in the ring, and then what do? You call it a draw, but
greatest draw their ever. Corpses would have rise and kept going.
But the way that those two really put the table for boxing is they had to actually bring down the total number of rounds from 15 down to 12 because of the war that those two had. They just really set the table again. That if you go too much in a fight, you're going to kill each other, and you're probably going to go blind or something.
Well, and the sad thing too, to really reflect on here is that years after what was one of the greatest boxing matches of all time, you had Joe Frazier, who was battling and eventually died because of cancer. You have Muhammad Ali with Parkinson's disease. He is obviously not the person he used to be. It's amazing to think about how different their lives became post boxing and where they are now.
Yeah, and you got to look at the other thing people are saying. After the Thrilla Manila, both of them should have retired because they were at the apex of where they could have gone, and it would have been done. And the other person you have to think about when you think of these two, you think of George Foreman.
Right.
You usually think of him grilling on his lean, mean, fat grilling machines.
It really does throw off the aura of George Foreman. But
if you think of it, he was the heavyweight boxer too, who fought these guys. It's that 3-ring group, but if you rise above it, the 1 and 1A, Frazier Ali, and then you have 1AB, George Foreman. So you've got to look at these three always are going to be interlinked together, and particularly with Frazier, these two guys, he wouldn't have been what he was without these two. They wouldn't have been what they were without him.
It's unfortunate that you really just can't get something that awesome in boxing anymore. Yeah. It's just Manny Pacquiao beating everyone, and the Glitchko brothers beating everyone that they fight.
They won't fight each other.
Right. We need a soundbite. Let me get to it here. It's always all the way in the back. So hard to get to. We've been informed by our good friend Steve Kandray, and I have to tell you, Vince, whatever you say for this next segment, he wants me to let you know that he disagrees before we even get going here.
All right.
D3 for 3, where we talk about Division III football, and last weekend, we saw Baltimore Walls almost win the OAC title here in Alliance. Of course, let's not spend too much time talking about the game. It's pretty much a moot point at this point, although I can tell you that was probably the craziest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Does Baldwin Wallace have a shot at the playoffs at getting a Pool C bid with their 2 losses? They got into the rankings this week like we thought that they would after the close loss to Mount Union. Do they have a shot? Should they have a shot here at a Pool C bid?
Yes, they do have a shot, but I don't necessarily think that they should have a shot because you talk about that second loss they had. It was a letdown against Capital. It was a game that Baldwin Wallace really should have won easily, and then they let Capital come back in the fourth quarter, score those points, and it's just one of those things that it's like if Baldwin Wallace doesn't get in, they're going to be frustrated. But it's like, you know what, you had the chance to beat Capital, just have one loss on the season, then you would have almost been a guaranteed Pool seed bid. But just things
easy. Everything
just goes wrong with that game against Capital, and they have a shot, but it's a lot smaller shot than if they would have beat Capital.
Imagine Baldwin Wallace's only loss was to Mount Union. They would have been ranked for that game. They would have lost to Mount Union. This is a Baldwin Wallace team that would have been easily ranked in the top 10, maybe around 5 or 6. That's an easy Pool C bid.
Yeah, that was just a bad job by them at the Capital. But you got to look at Capital too. When we went to play them, their defensive line was very stingy, very surprising. You also have to look at the fact that most of their victories have come when they've come back in the fourth quarter. So at the same time that you're seeing that, you have to look and see that this Capital team made their living off of that. That might soften the blow a little bit for that Baldwin Wallace team. At the same time, though, 2 losses, particularly in Division III, very hard to get into the playoffs after 2 losses. But I think they have a shot. I think they do deserve a shot just because of how they played, they've been playing the entire season. And I really find it hard that Steve would disagree with me on this one.
but it was a preemptive disagreement.
And as another aside, that was definitely the craziest game because I've never heard the entire stadium erupt like that on a touchdown pass for
definitely not a routine touchdown pass for Mount Union in that game.
But you talk about Vince, you talk about Capital. The thing that really hurts Baldwin Wallace with that game is it was in Berea. It was at home for Baldwin Wallace. Okay. Now, had that been on the road at Bexley at Capital, then it would be a little bit different because teams always play better at home. But since Baldwin Wallace let Capital come back while Capital is on the road and BW is at home where they normally play good, that is the thing that's really going to hurt them.
Yeah, and it was a complete fourth quarter collapse against Capital, and it was unfortunate for BW. I really want this team to make the playoffs. They could make some noise. BW could in the playoffs if they play like they did at Mount. The question is, can they get themselves that up for every game?
If they make it, I would personally love to meet them in the title game again.
Raiders would be an interesting concept. Of course, that would require Wisconsin Whitewater to lose. I digress, though. This is Raider Zone again, a fantasy matchup where myself, Billy, Vince, and Steve Kandray, who is out of studio obviously this week, we are in a fantasy league against each other, and I can tell you what, I am an unstoppable juggernaut. I've won what, like 4 in a row? I can't lose at this point. I'm basically unbeatable.
I think you guys should
surrender now. Yeah, because I started so terribly. You should basically all surrender. There's no point in continuing to play against me.
I will never surrender against you, Jesse. You and I go up against each other this weekend. That's going to be a crazy matchup. You know what? Same division. I'm 7-2. You're 5-4. I'm 2 games up on you.
I think Steve's gravy train stopped.
Yeah, Steve's gravy train stopped quite some time ago.
I was so upset. He's ahead of me by a ton of points this last game. I'm like, all right, I got Forte and I got Vic. That should vault me enough. Vincent Jackson. I leave him on the bench. 32 points. Would have been beautiful to put him in. And so he's yelling at me, why didn't I put Schaub in? Well, I'll tell you why I didn't put Schaub in. Schaub got me 8 total points against the Browns. You know how much Vic got me? 9. It wouldn't have mattered. They were both terrible. And Forte didn't do that well either, so it's just one of those games where it's only against you. Whenever they're supposed to do good, they decide to stink. Against you only, Billy.
Whatever you gotta tell yourself. The thing that's awesome about this week, I think me and Billy combined are expected to score like 260 points.
Yeah, I'm projected to put up like 124. Jesse's projected to put up 141 or something. I'm a 17-point underdog. But you look at it, none of my players are in the outside of 8th in their position. All my players are in the single digits. Yeah. And I'm thinking, all right, I got a good team. Jesse, no, he's got Aaron Rodgers, LaShawn McCoy, and Jimmy Graham, who are number 1 at their respective positions. Right. I've got Fred Jackson, Drew Brees, and Rob Gronkowski, who are number 2 at those positions, the same ones that Jesse has. So
we can't all be me.
Yeah,
we can't all be me.
Oh, the joys of a 4-team league.
Again, I kept saying it the first couple weeks where I didn't win, and you didn't believe me. I said it was, it wasn't fair. I was losing cheap games. My team was awesome, but for some reason I just had terrible luck, and finally that luck has turned around, baby, and I'm unstoppable.
If you want to look at terrible luck, look at Vince.
Yeah, come on.
That's true, Vince.
The Monday Night Football game between the Bears and the Vikings, he has Peterson and Forte down by 22 against me. They scored combined 20, and I win by 2.
Hey, don't blame Adrian Peterson for that. No. Adrian Peterson is a beautiful human being.
He is.
You should never insult.
Would you say that if you weren't playing for the Vikings, though?
Would I say that if you weren't playing for the Vikings? No, I wouldn't care about the bum. Pick time. Number 7, Oregon, taking on number 4, Stanford.
This is going to be a great matchup. I think Stanford wins it because they're at home this year. I think that Oregon just lost too much of that offensive line this year, and Andrew Luck, I think, is going to be able to pick apart that defense.
Oregon hasn't lost since that LSU game, and they didn't even lose it by that much, so you got to look at it. It's going to be a great game. However, picking Stanford anyways, I'm going with Billy here at home, they're just, Andrew Luck, just too much.
You guys can't see the big picture here. Oregon is going to beat Stanford simply because what's going to happen here is it's going to set up the stage for Boise State to sneak its way into the national title game and defeat the greatest team ever assembled in Louisiana State. And it's going to be the greatest day ever. So
they'll just drop them right in front of them again.
So I'm going to go with Oregon. Well, not that I believe that Oregon can win, but I want to believe, so I'm going to believe. Number 19, Nebraska at number 12, Penn State. This is going to be an interesting game because obviously Penn State's under a lot of fire, but could they pull out an emotional victory in Happy Valley?
I think they could. You heard a lot of the players saying this week that they're going to be playing for Joe Pa this weekend. But after that, I think it's a big letdown for the season, especially with the way that they went 8-1. Their only loss so far this year was to Alabama, which was a great matchup. But I think they win this weekend, but the rest of the season, I think it's shot.
I really want to pull for Penn State on this. I really do. However, Nebraska wins this game. There's just too much going on right now, too much controversy. I don't care what the seniors say. They said the same thing with Cincinnati when their coach left, that they were just going to go and they got stomped in their bowl game. I think Nebraska comes in, and I think Nebraska wins. I want Penn State to win, though.
Yeah, looking at this game, Nebraska just came off a loss to Northwestern. That was really unexpected.
That was horrible.
Yeah, that was.
Are you
pretty
kidding? That was awesome.
It was horrible for Nebraska. It was awesome for us, and way to go, nerds.
Welcome to the Big Ten. How about you lose to our second worst team? But anyway, Nebraska, I think, wins this game. I just don't think Penn State's going to be able to pull it off. They're going to be missing a huge chunk of their coaching staff. They're going to be missing, just way too much going on at Penn State. But I believe this is going to be probably the most emotional game of football that's been played in quite some time. Mm-hmm. Number 10, Virginia Tech takes on number 21, Georgia Tech. Huge matchup of ACC teams. Virginia Tech, of course, trying to continue its stranglehold on the ACC title if they can win this game.
I think Georgia Tech wins this game. I think that option offense is just going to be too much for the Hokie defense to handle, and that matchup for in the last week of the regular season between Virginia and Virginia Tech is going to determine the Coastal Division champs.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Virginia Tech on this one. Virginia Tech is always very good, particularly late in the year against ACC opponents. Outside the ACC, not so much. But you got to take a look at these guys. I think Virginia Tech wins this.
Tell you what, if the Hokies wear those beautiful white throwback helmets, they're unstoppable. Those things are amazing. I love them. Best helmets in college football. But I'll go with Virginia Tech in this game over Georgia Tech. I think Virginia Tech, they can't not win the ACC, I believe, at this point. Let's move on to the NFL. New York Giants at San Francisco.
I'm going to take the Niners in this game. New York coming off a great win against New England. I think they fall into a little bit of a trap game. And San Francisco playing some great football this year.
There's a lot of people waiting for Eli Manning to have one of his, the Eli Manning face comes out games where he throws about 4 interceptions and no one understands why he threw it in that direction. This is the game. San Francisco, I think, wins this.
And I hope it is because I got San Francisco defense this week.
Yeah, at San Francisco, Giants going across the country to play this game. It's so hard to go across the country and win a game in 1 week. So I'm going to go with San Francisco just because it's a great team at home. And I'm hard-pressed to pick against them. New England at the New York Jets.
Give me the Jets. I think that they get things back on track, and I think the Patriots going to keep on having a letdown season. The defense for the Jets having a great year, and I think that Sean Green rushes for 175 yards this week.
People started questioning the Patriots' offense as well as their defense in these past few weeks here. I'm going to go with the Jets. They're hitting their stride. They're really with the running game. Tom Brady shaves his head in an attempt to turn his fortunes around.
You know, what's funny is that the Jets are it's hilarious. Everyone was off the bandwagon. They're done. They win one game. Everyone's back on the bandwagon. Then they lose. Everyone's off the bandwagon again. Now it's at the Meadowlands with the Patriots coming into town. Honestly, I think the Patriots can win this game, not because their defense is going to hold them in this game, but I just can't see a Bill Belichick coach team losing this many games in a row.
One thing to note, since Rex Ryan took over, Patriots have not won at the Meadowlands Stadium.
Right. It's a big game, and for both teams, really. Both teams' season is in peril here, and I think I'm going to go with the Patriots, though, over the Jets. Oakland at San Diego, which is, of course, going on right now.
Give me the Raiders. San Diego struggling. They lost 2 in a row, and they're not looking like the former Charger football team that we're used to seeing in November.
Give me San Diego for the simple fact I have Phillip Rivers and I have Vincent Jackson playing tonight. I need them to produce.
Well, I do. I don't have Vincent Jackson. I do have Antonio Gates and Phillip Rivers, though, so it couldn't hurt to have them produce. For what it's worth, the San Diego offense did seem to hit its stride last weekend, and they're at home against the Raiders. What I'm more interested to see is the progression of Carson Palmer. He looked much better than his half-game debut, forced debut. So it'll be interesting to watch the Raiders move forward. I think they can actually get it on track, but I don't think it'll happen tonight. I'm going to go with the Chargers. Bonus pick, guys. The odds that Cincinnati gets the wild card berth or better for the AFC.
I think they have a 45% chance of getting the wild card berth just for the fact that you and I talked about before the show, Jesse. They got both games against Pittsburgh and both games against Baltimore. Those are 4 games that's going to be tough for them to win.
Yeah, right there. I'm going to go 50% for the simple fact that Baltimore is one of those teams this year we've seen. They lose to the most bizarre teams. I have a feeling they may just go 0-4 against the AFC South this year. Maybe give the Colts their first win. Their 2 losses this year have been to AFC South teams. So, but that being said, the Bengals are a surprisingly resilient team. They're very good defensively. They have a chance to do it. Now, that's why I'm giving 50, though, because of that schedule at the end.
I'd tell you what, the Andy Dalton, A.J. Green connection, that might be a scary thing to watch develop here if both of them, develop as expected. I'm going to give it the Bengals about a 40% chance to doing this. They got a shot. I mean, the offense and defense are both decent enough to perhaps pull this off if they can catch the Steelers and Ravens each on an off week. At least once. They got a chance to do it, but that's a huge uphill climb for the Bengals to try to pull off. So that'll do it for us this week on Raiders Zone Weekly. We thank you for joining us, and if you don't forget to check us out online on YouTube, we'll have this uploaded here in just a little bit, or at least we will attempt to, if you can't listen in on a week-to-week basis. And we hope you'll join us next week, Thursday, as usual, from 8 to 9 p.m. Don't forget to tune in on Saturday, last regular season game of the year for Mount Union, traveling to Muskingum to take on the Fighting Muskies. Started off the year 4-0, now are 4-5. Purple Raiders looking to make them 4-6 to end the regular season and head into the playoffs. Gino's pregame show scheduled for 12:45, kickoff for 1:30 for the final OAC game of the year. We hope you'll be listening to us. Until then, keep listening to the radio voice of Mount Union. This is WRMU 91.1.